Is there a proposal writing process that echoes the process of the scientific method? You'd think there would be, wouldn't you? Here's our received view of the scientific method. An idea is derived, a process is begun, an experiment is run, results are derived, the results are compared with other people who have done similar research, comparison and contrast is made. Sometimes the experiment is run again. Why not with a writing process? We begin by simply writing a document from its beginning to its end. We might then take it and give it to someone else, get back some comments, and then submit it. The only problem is that's not how it works. Research and the teaching of writing have taught us that the linear process is incorrect, but let's be candid. The linear process is incorrect in the scientific method as well. It doesn't work according to that straightforward step-by-step process. Instead, it proceeds by fits, by starts, by jumps. It certainly is methodical, it's certainly rigorous. It's just not linear. So let's talk a little bit about the idea not of steps, but of phases, an important distinction. Empirical research and how literacy evolves and is created has told us a number of important things. Preparation is a very important part of it. In our case, the proposal writing process will be structured in a certain way. Time will be structured in a certain way, depending on how much we know about the agency, its objectives, its own mission. Pre-writing is also an important part of the process, and I'll encourage you during this lecture to actually draw some of your ideas out so that you might better understand how they'll fit together. Tasks determine the way things work. The particular task that you set for yourself in designing a proposal is very precise and very exact. The way that you'll construe that task over a period of time, and the time will be finite, will be an important part of how the writing process evolves. Look at the last two, fluency and editing. Think back to your grammar school experiences. Remember the red pen? Remember the degree to which every spelling, comma, grammatical mistake was painfully called to your attention, and remember after a while you felt you didn't want to write at all. Certainly the idea of fluency and editing are important. Research has told us that we must have one principle. Fluency must come first. It's important that you get your ideas down, because your ideas can then be read by others. I'm not saying that you don't want to edit carefully, and you don't want to have a meticulous document by the time the document goes out the door. It's just that if you don't get something down in the first place, there's nothing to send out. In another lecture, we'll cover the different parts of the proposal, but I want to outline them here, all the way from the cover letter to the plan of work, all the way from the assessment of a project to its supporting materials, so that you can understand the ways that the parts of the proposal can be addressed in the phase process I'm advocating here. Again, to keep in mind before we begin, it is a campaign. It's a complex piece of work that you're going to do that will involve collaboratively other people, and that you don't have all the time in the world to do this. So the phase approach we're advocating has to be broken down and understood in a precise, constrained time situation. The approach I'm advocating is inspired in some ways by classical rhetoric, by the idea of invention and arrangement and style. Let's begin at the very beginning with the idea of invention and working up the proposal while concurrently identifying the funding source. That is, I think it's naive to come up with an idea and then hunt around for a funding source. I think what you should do is discuss your topic with people who are experienced proposal writers and people who have also had experience with funding organizations. In this way, you'll be able to tailor and refine your idea to the particular mission, needs, objectives of certain organizations. I think you need to anticipate obstacles. This can be any way from the way that people function to the way that holidays seem to break into our most intense work. Also in this invention stage, you want to sketch your ideas, and I've used the word draw very deliberately, the proposal. In my own work, I cannot write anything extensively unless I first draw it. So the freedom that comes with drawing something out, sort of in a cognitive complexity map, is important. As well, You want to identify in this early stage the most experienced readers, identify who's going to work on the project, and prepare a draft budget. Supporting materials become important. Many grants I've done, I have to have letters of support from certain organizations, and sometimes from my own university, I have to have an established match. People don't like it when you ask them for things last minute. So early in the invention, the planning part of the proposal process, start gathering up the supporting material as well as planning the draft budget. Develop a timeline, not for the completion of the proposal if you get it, but a timeline for the proposal itself so it can be submitted due to the deadline. And then assign tasks. Again, it's a collaborative project, different people working on different parts of the proposal. The second phase is arrangement. Look at it carefully. Think back to the anatomy. Now, you don't begin the cover letter. You don't begin with the executive summary. You begin with the objectives, and as we'll talk about later in our anatomy of the proposal, these are described in behavioral terms. Then you write the plan, how it's going to be accomplished, and then you write, which is increasingly over the last 10 years, I think, an important section, the assessment, how it is empirically that you'll find out if your proposal has been a success. Then look carefully at the budget as it emerges, and then go back again and look at the objectives, look at the plan in terms of the budget, in terms of what you can realistically accomplish for the money you're asking for. And then, only at that point, take a draft, and it'll only be a draft at this point of the executive summary. Why? The executive summary implies that you know all the major parts of this piece of this document as it's emerging, and you can't really know that till you actually get something down through the objectives, plan, assessment, and budget. To me, those are the most important places to start. From that, you can back into these other sections, the personnel, the timeline. The background can be written later. Although it's an early part of the proposal, it can be written later because it's the narrative that will help you establish the context for work. You really can't understand the context for work unless you understand your part in it, and that has to be done from previous work on objectives. The conclusion, the title, the executive summary, again drafted out after you've gotten these other parts done. The table of contents will, as we'll talk about in another lecture, provide cohesion. And then the cover letter. The supporting materials, of course, are not begun at this point. You started those during the invention stage, and here you just gather them up. Pause for a minute on this. It's important to get readers, but it's very bad to just give someone a document and say, what do you think? It's more important to provide a section-by-section commentary sheet so a reader can respond very exactly, very precisely to the ideas. For example, if you want a budget analyst to look at the budget, you've got to call into question those things that you're unsure of, or those things that you think you're sure of, are they coming clear to the reader? So don't just hand the document to someone. Hand the document to someone or to multiple readers with precisely arranged commentary sheets so they know what it is you want them to look at. Finally, the idea of style. Submit the draft to the readers and provide with their recommendations in mind, and resubmit it to readers for another go if you have the time. You revise for content and style, you print it, and then you proofread it for errors. I can't say enough about this stage. If you begin it too early, you inhibit your fluency. If you begin it too late, you send a document out that's full of errors. Both issues are problematic. What to do? I would suggest very often, it's an extensive proposal, you identify a proofreader, someone who's very good at this, or you simply take the money to hire a professional proofreader. It's well worth the money. The final proofreading, the final print, and again, the submission. If you follow this process, I assure you that you'll be able to send out a most effective, most polished, and most compelling proposal.